Hey, everybody, we'll kick off in just a minute. We're just letting people sign on, and we'll be starting here in about a minute or two with Ed, Randy, and Chris. Welcome, Ed. We'll go ahead and kick it over to Ed to do an intro.
All right, thanks everyone for attending today's webinar on cash reporting powers smarter, how cash reporting powers smarter Treasury decisions. I'm Ed Barry. I'm Chief Product Officer here at Treasury 4, and I'm joined today by Chris Blow, who's Senior Director of Treasury at Twilio, as well as Randy DeVita, our Vice President of Customer Success. And we're going to share some ideas and examples of how we're leveraging and our customers are leveraging data analytics to really drive decisions and present information and insights to their organization on their treasury data. As we get started today, we'd love to start out with a poll question in terms of what are the tools that the attendees are using to drive insight and support decision making against their treasury and finance data, and specifically managing cash. I'd love to just collect some of those inputs and see how the tools that users are leveraging. So feel free to respond to the pop-up on the poll questions.
We'll keep that up for about a couple seconds here.
Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds. And for sure, we know that spreadsheets or Excel are going to be at the top of that list.
Go ahead and end this and share out the results.
Okay. So what we're seeing here is, of course, Excel. So no surprise there, reporting from a treasury management system, and then third-party tools like Power BI, Click, and Tableau. Tableau is still near and dear to my heart. I had the opportunity to work for them for a number of years, and so it's great to see that still used there. So, really, I thought setting the stage today for the discussion and even though we're really kind of focused in on cash, but really thinking about the broader office of the CFO. What are the data needs from a platform? And how do you drive decisions for the organization? When you think about what's happening in the treasury and broader finance world, the march to real time is compressing time for everybody. People are asking, and management's asking for information and insights, and they expect responses more quickly. They want to really focus, obviously, on cash and having a precise picture of your cash position, your transactions, and understanding your cash flow and your cash flow forecast. And I think one of the important things is really tying cash and investments to your legal entity structure and understanding the flow of funds across your bank accounts, across your investment accounts. How does money move across the organization, incoming and outgoing, and tying it to your legal entity structure. And then I think we can all agree that there's no treasury team that has an abundance of IT resources. IT teams have more on their plate than what they can deal with. And so how do you stand up solutions that are easy to use, intuitive, and require little to no IT support? And so that's kind of the things that are what we're seeing in the office of the CFO, but also really getting data into the hands of the CFO, the corporate controller, head of tax, treasurer, and being able to drive those insights for the organization. So I'm going to turn it over here to Randy DeVita to share some commentary about how we think about data analytics here at Treasury 4.
Thanks, Ed, and even just show it. I think a big part of Treasury 4 data analytics is just empowering our customers to get the information they need to answer questions. And this is one of the first things is what do you need to see? And when we talk about cash, you want to see, for example, how much cash do we have over any sort of period of time or in one period of time. You also can see you're able to interact with the data. So you can actually go and say, well, not only how much cash do I have, but where is that cash? Which banks is it with? Which entities hold those balances? So you're able to interact with the data that you have in the system using analytics. But you can also see how, not just where is it, but how is it allocated, for lack of a better term. You know, what is cash versus investments versus restricted cash, and you can truly interact with the data by saying, well, you know, let me maybe look at what are the balances that I have on any one day, by bank, and group it by currencies, and filter out the USD, and see what are the currency balances I have by bank, or with one bank versus the other. Um, so you're able to sort of interact with the data. You might have to keep clicking on it, Ed, for it to run here.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry about
Oh,
that.
yeah, no worries. So you can interact with the data and kind of interrogate all of the, not just balance information, but there's transaction details as well that our customers are wanting to know about. So the balances move over time. What's moving those balances? This is just an example of how a customer might look at customer receipts that have come in over a period of time. Who are those customer receipts for? And even able to drill into the detail. So it's not just this visual representation of the information, but you can drill into the actual transaction details that are coming in from the banks and see what's building the receipts for a period of time.
That's great, Randy. Thanks for sharing on that. I think the next question, though, is really, how do you want to see data? How do
Yep.
users want to? So, love to get your thoughts there.
Well, it's a big part of, and it's really fun working with customers like Chris, because it's not just giving them a data, but allowing them to configure it. So in the Treasury Analytics, you can certainly take the content that we're providing, but you can also edit that content. Or even in this case, explore, like just provisionally say, how do I might want to change it? So instead of looking at, in this case, accounts receivable, you might say, I want to look at accounts payable, and change the filter and say, well, what is the account payable for entities? I can add filters to report provisionally. So you're able to sort of just explore the content that you get from Treasury 4, adjust it in such a way that you can actually look at accounts payable. But visuals, sometimes, some people like pies over donuts, so that you can shift the visuals if you need to, and look at the visuals in ways that make sense. You can also read it. So some of this stuff is eye chart driven, so you can change the fonts that you see here. So you're able to customize not just how the data is presented, but how you might want to read it. Super easy to configure, and it's not just visual data. So the visual data that's in the system is supported by the actual information, the underlying balances in this case, and that can be reconfigured so that you can say, hey, instead of me grouping cash balances by cash and investment and restricted, I can group it by regions. I might not want to look at it by region. So sometimes customers will say, I want to see it by country. What we're doing is we're able to allow our customers, we're curating not just the data, but data sets, so that they can design these reports and go pick out, let's say, an entity country, pull that into the report, drop it up there, and now group on countries as well. So we're trying to make it not just easy for them to configure the report the way they want to see it, but curate the data sets themselves, so they don't have to be report designers. They're just able to just reconfigure the report, and you can explore the data and then choose to say, hey, I'm going to set it back the way it was, or save it the way that you've done it. So you're able to sort of provisionally explore the data and see it the way you want to see it.
Great. So now thinking about how do you communicate that data?
Yeah. So then if you want to, I think, just go forward one more.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. And I think that's a big part of what we see with customers, is not just what do you want to see, how do you want to see it, who actually should see the data, and it's a question of distributing the information. So now you can take reports that we've either delivered or that you might configure for yourselves, and go through and, for example, export the data. So you can export things into Excel. You can grab the underlying data. And you can take the information and send it out. You can also take dashboards as you've designed them and export them really easily, and they can be distributed to other people or dropped into like a PowerPoint slide or whatever it's going to be. So we've tried to take this idea of dashboards and make them easy to, maybe for our customers, we don't have everybody always logging into the platform. A lot of people want to be able to give the information to others, so you're able to export that information. But you can also automate it. So the reports themselves, as you've designed them, can be scheduled to go out to other users within the organization, where you can take a dashboard that you've built and set it up to go like every day. But also what we've seen is it can be conditional. You can say, hey, I want to generate this dashboard, not just every business day, but only when, let's say, a balance is under a certain threshold. Then I want this report to actually be generated and sent to me or sent to somebody else. And then you just click this report. It can be set up as a schedule, but you can send it to email, and off it will go. Produce an email that you're able to pop up here in a moment. And it sends you the email. You've got the report. You open the report, and then you're able to distribute that information to either to yourself or to others in an automated way, where you don't have to actually be coming in and navigating the data. So just at a high level, I think what we've seen is with data analytics, and I know you and Chris will get a little more into it, is it really is allowing people to decide what is it they need to see, how do they want to see it, and who actually can see it. And those have been some of the biggest changes we've seen.
That's great. And so I think really now we'd love to just hear from you, Chris, and thinking about, and sharing, how does Twilio use data analytics in the Treasury 4 platform? Love to understand and hear from you on some of the content and use cases and what the impact has been for you and your team and organization, and then really who's getting information, who's receiving it, and just whatever you would like to share.
Sure, thanks. Happy to be here. I think generally for us, or I'd say myself and Twilio as well, we follow a couple of key principles when we're kind of looking at data, or when I'm looking at data, and we've been following what I would kind of call a question-based design approach, right? So what are the types of questions that we're getting today across the organization? How are we answering today? Is it manual? Is there ability to automate it? And to your point earlier on around resourcing, what can we do to make all that information either self-serve or put it in someone's inbox, right, so to speak. So there's that piece. I think the second piece is we're trying to be very deliberate about what we represent and what we show, and the aesthetics of what we show. I think there's a tendency when you get into kind of analytics and reporting that you tend to give out too much information, right? So we try to be very meaningful about what we create, limit the number of dashboards, and also make sure the appropriate information goes to the appropriate level. So for example, let's say your CFO may want to see trending in overall balances. They don't necessarily care about your balances in Spain, right, for example. And then the other piece, which I know you guys have already touched upon, is around breadth, and when I mean breadth, I mean kind of leveraging data that's traditionally more treasury owned and pushing it to the broader organization. So is that cash flow data that you can share with corporate FP&A around planning and trending? Is it data on transaction level details that accounting can use for reconciliations? Is it customer collections data that's being used by the credit and collection teams to monitor and look at where we're kind of trending in terms of cash beyond kind of broader, treasury type use cases? I think in terms of the kind of impacts and benefits, the big thing I think is just making the data more accessible across functions, across levels, and the fact, as I said, that data is now a kind of push versus pull. So for example, in the Treasury environment, we have a number of dashboards that we created, and to Randy's point, you can use kind of curated dashboards. You can, I'm a bit of a geek on this stuff, so you can create your own dashboards and reporting. So for example, we might have a number of reports that we push out to Treasury on a daily basis. We might push out to collections on a daily basis, but maybe to CFO, we push out a cash snapshot at the end of the month. Or to Randy's point, on the investment side, can we set triggers if we see certain types of activity? So I think the big benefit is the accessibility to the data. The kind of follow on from that is I just think you get increased scrutiny on kind of the day-to-day, because all of a sudden that data is so much more visible, right? So if something looks odd, it's not necessarily that something's wrong, but people are asking questions, and when you ask questions, you get more interaction, and then you come to better outcomes. So it's almost like you're getting an outside view. So it's not just the collections guys looking at collections data. The Treasury guys see it, corporate FP&A see it. Whoever else wants to see that data, it's there. And I think in turn, like the benefit is we're trying to shift and leveraging primarily cash flow data from a kind of reactive response through typical kind of a closing the books type reporting, right, to a more proactive approach to working capital. So, where am I today? In month 2 versus where I was in month 1. What was I like this time last year? I've got a few days left in the quarter. Am I comfortable? Like, what am I seeing? Are there certain customer payments I haven't seen? And so I think it's more a case of better knowing your landscape, and then there's less surprises kind of down the road. So I think that's the key benefits. We're still learning, we're still playing. I think the great thing, as Randy said, like if you don't like something, you can change it. It's very easy to do. You don't need to know a lot to be dangerous, as these guys have found out. And I kind of like to make Randy and team's guys life difficult, but it's fantastic that you're not reliant on IT or development resources to make kind of pretty material changes across the data sets.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing all that. Well, I guess maybe one of my questions is, what surprised you the most in terms of the organizational use of data or analytics, specifically the Treasury data? Any key surprises or insights that you've come across?
I mean, the challenge, I guess, which is always there with data, and it's one of whether actually it's Excel based or slightly more advanced, how we're talking now, is kind of data integrity, and that's integrity of the systems, but then also integrity of data sources, right? And so especially when you're interacting with banks, I think one of the things that I always find surprising is, you may have confirmation that something's changed, and then you'll get a year, 18 months down the line, if I talk about bank signers, for example, that hasn't changed. And so I think having the data in front of you means you continue to kind of reconfirm, and I'm always kind of surprised in that sense that there's still kind of issues more on the banking side than on the corporate side. The other thing it's a lot easier, and I thought was going to be more complicated, was broader data sources, right? So the ability to connect data, and especially in the Treasury space, there's always some kind of unique key between data. So if it's bank signers, if it's to accounts, then maybe it's entity or whatever it might be, right? Or to transactional type data or investment type data, and just how you're able to kind of consolidate that and pull that all together to give yourself a more holistic view, right? And so I think typically when we talk about, let's say, cash, for example, you're talking about cash in bank, and then you might be separately looking at your money funds or short-term investments or kind of separate investments. And I'm not trying to replace some of the more sophisticated reporting specifically in some of those separate aspects, but a high level 30,000-foot consolidated view, that was a lot easier to achieve than I initially expected, and so that's a big win.
That's great. And I think that's actually a great segue into the kind of the next slide here, which is if I can manage my mouse here a little bit better.
Actually, can I jump in real quick, Ed?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry,
Please, Randy.
No, the timing's right. And I was going to ask Chris, somebody's popped into the chat. I think a pretty relevant question, like what's the learning curve for customizing, creating the reports? Like how have you found that, Chris?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say I'm somewhat biased because I had a decent amount of experience previously playing with programs like Tableau. So I do think if I look at what I'm doing versus maybe a couple of the guys on my team, maybe that experience helped, but I do find it's very intuitive. I mean, in terms of, you may have seen in the video, like it's broadly dragging and dropping, right? If you're looking for data fields, you can change stuff around. Like every system, you're gonna have to learn a little bit where things are, but like once you know that, it's pretty quick. As I said, once your data sources are set up, which is the Treasury 4 guys did a great job helping us do that. That's pretty robust, and there's very good signage in the system in terms of what's linked to what and what you can change. So I think it's pretty quick. You can certainly do a lot very quickly. It might take a little bit more time to to kind of go to the next iteration, but you can do almost anything with the data, frankly, right? Like you can take a column and create a brand new column basically using kind of Excel type formulas. So actually what you're doing in terms of creating tables in something like the analytics piece is very similar to what you might have built in Excel from a data standpoint.
Yeah.
I think what's the level up is the ability to manipulate the visualizations attached to that data, right? And whether you want to double click into something, if you want to pop out some information, if you want to put a filter on the whole screen, right? That's very impressive, and it's relatively intuitive. And I'm always happy to chat with anybody as well. I'll put that out there in terms of any learnings.
No, that's great. I think I'm off on my slides here a little bit. Really, I got one slide ahead of myself here, but really, we'd love to understand, Chris, or I think the attendees would love to understand, what's next in terms of your priorities at Twilio. And we've talked about some of these other adjacent data sources and getting those brought into Treasury 4 so that you can then expand and extend how you're looking at data and working with data. I'd just love to get some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so if we look at like beyond the basic entity for structure, which is more around entity structure, like foundational bank account signers, that kind of thing. Really, we're trying to build on cash flow information and leverage across the business. So, like as I kind of already mentioned, but beyond cash and bank, can we bring in data from our money funds? Yes, we can do that. Can we bring in data from our custodian for our separately managed accounts? Yes. Okay. Could we then enrich that data through connecting to systems like Clearwater, right, which brings in additional enrichment on the investment side? Can we connect to an ERP, in our case, Oracle? And to give you an example, can I then use the cash flow data that I have in Treasury 4, which is on the payment side, which is typically in batches, right? So can I take the batch information from the ERP, connect it to the transaction detail batch that I have in Treasury 4, and then all of a sudden now I almost have payments at the same level of detail as I have collections, right? I can see who I paid, the invoice numbers, whatever it might be. And then the other one, which is more on the collection side, is today we look at invoice customers versus customers who pay us by credit card through merchant processors. So right now, like merchant processors is, let's call it 25-ish%, whatever it might be, of revenue. It's a single bar, right? I don't have the same kind of breakdown by customer that I have on the invoice stack. So potentially connecting in there and leveraging that data to give me kind of enriched visibility. Because once you get that kind of more detail, that second iteration of data, it just becomes so much more useful to those teams, right? And I also don't have to then, I was going to say harass, but there can be very basic questions, right? So on the collection side, for example, if we have a large inflow, in the past, I would kind of go to a collections analyst and say, hey, like I've seen a big jump in cash flows, I can see it in the statements, but it's quicker for me to come to you and ask in Slack or whatever and say, hey, what was this payment? I'm like, oh, I just look in my transactions and whatever in my dashboard I created. Turns out we received whatever 20 million from Amazon, whatever it may be. So I think that enrichment is important. And then there's kind of a separate aspect in terms of broader functionality, right, Ed? So do we want to bring derivative information from FX interest rate hedges? Do we want to consider some of our capital market activities, like debt, outstanding debt, buyback, transactional type data? I think that's almost a separate kind of add-on or module, whereas the kind of first pieces around just enriching the cash flow data we have is kind of, I think, more within reach. And the landscape's changing so quickly around APIs, where that's becoming somewhat more easier over time. Although APIs and those things have been around for a while, but I think that's a big shift.
Yeah, and I'd say like with the APIs and connecting to banks and you're using the from your banks the connectivity via APIs, but that kind of extended data payload at the transaction level. I think there's a lot of data in there that's can be leveraged for various insights, maybe volume and value of transactions in a currency other than the account currency, or maybe fee deducts that are happening on cross-border wires, or extended detail on who's paying or who you're paying, so that you have even kind of further granularity there. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for just banks overall to really think about the value of that data that they can provide, principally via APIs, because we know it's not going to end up in kind of the legacy MT940 BAI2 statements, and there's certainly an unlock there. It's been fun working with you on that to uncover some of those things there.
And I guess with ISO 222, you've got potentially some more kind of standardization, transparency. But just on your last point, I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of stuff that at least from a transactional banking standpoint within Treasury. I think there's a lot of stuff that's happening, but the resource required to identify and to identify those kind of issues, right? Using wires versus ACH or whatever it might be, general kind of banking charges, it kind of all just gets swept under the rug because you're like, oh, that's too much of a mess. I can't worry about it. Where actually, in fact, like all that data is there. And so once you can digest that data and you can spend some time to create some kind of template around that data, yeah, there's a one-time cost to that, but in theory, it pays for itself pretty quickly.
One question I have, and it kind of goes back a little bit to the APIs, but also kind of the need for real-time decision making. Are you seeing that as a trend in Treasury? Like, okay, I'm connecting to the banks via API, I'm getting data sooner, near time effectively, and can I then surface that more quickly to the organization or for your team to make quick decisions or understand the nature of maybe certain transactions? How do you think about that kind of time compression?
Yeah, I think from a pure Treasury standpoint, I've always struggled to see the benefit. I think kind of next day or previous day statements is fine, but I think what's been interesting, especially in my role, Twilio, where kind of closer to C-suite, there are a lot more real-time questions, especially around period ends, right? Are we expecting to be where we're going to be? Are we coming in, especially on cash flow, and for Twilio, like free cash flow has been such a big thing in the last kind of 12 months or so. So I think especially around end periods or around particular transactions, there's probably a value about having that, almost instantaneous type view. And I think if that comes with the API, that's great. But I don't think, like, from Twilio's standpoint, if we were using the MT940s, like, we go and build a whole process where we're trying to pull those like hourly, for example, from the banks. So I think it's a great benefit to have. But I think it's kind of one of those things that maybe becomes more value in very specific circumstances, and maybe also very particular businesses. We're lucky at Twilio, we have a strong balance sheet, very predictable cash flows, and we have a very clean structure, a sweep structure, everything kind of consolidates up. So I don't have a big headache around where's our liquidity at, or like in a certain entity. There are always exceptions to that. So I think it's somewhat probably business specific as well.
Yeah, I agreed on that. Well, thank you for sharing kind of your priorities and where you see going next here. So I think our kind of next item here is what is Treasury 4 focused on for data and analytics, and just for everybody who's on the call here, just a couple of things on our architecture. We're built on the Microsoft Azure cloud. Each customer has their own dedicated ring-fenced SQL database that all their data is going into. There's no commingling of data, and then we provision Snowflake, and that's what really we're replicating that data, pushing it over there, and then making it available for reporting. What's interesting about that is that we've also had customers then say, oh, if I have my Treasury 4 data in Snowflake, can you push that into our corporate instance of Snowflake? And the answer is yes. We've done that for one of our customers. So it's kind of, you're seeing this like really great case of the extension of the ecosystem of data, right? Treasury data, banking data, payments data, and now it's how it's kind of flowing almost like a river into these other systems, all the way back into a corporate data warehouse. So we think about, how do we extend that data securely for our customers so they can work with their data however they choose to work with it. And then the big focus for us is really curating this set of dashboards, kind of pre-built templates, as it were, for really the office of the CFO. What are those key questions that CFOs are asking about? Chris, you touched on this: free cash flow, operating cash flow. How are we trending? Where are we at today versus the remaining days in the quarter, and drawing insights to that. And then some of the other activities that you mentioned, maybe around capital markets and share repurchase, because I imagine, having managed a share repurchase program in the past, the questions from the CFO, what's our spend and number of shares and average price, by any time bucket, for the quarter, for the year, for the whole program. And so things like that seems to be consistent questions that are coming up. And I think importantly is allowing our customers to interact with their data however securely, however they choose to interact with that. And as an example, Snowflake is a big enabler to allow for that. But we're also thinking about, as Chris had mentioned, these adjacent spaces that are typically not these adjacent data sets and sources that aren't really part of a traditional treasury management system. So you touched on merchant processing data, being able to bring that in at a transaction level and understand, okay, here's the payout that I received into my bank account, but then what makes that up? All these payments, net of refunds or deductions and fees that might be charged in that process, and really bridging that and connecting that data set as an example. I love the example that you shared on the investment data and the custody view, the direct kind of provider custody view, but also augmented with the investment accounting view. And then of course, ERP data. So just trying to extend that data ecosystem. Those are key areas for us in 2025 and beyond. Randy, anything you want to add into that?
I think outside of all the technical bits, I think the thing that's been exciting and working with Chris and Twilio and other customers with data is how much it's driven or inspired use. So it's been fun to sort of, in the same way, Chris, I think you described, as you provision certain reports, you'll get more questions. As we provision these sort of capabilities, we get more questions from you and from customers about how can we do this. And so that's been an exciting thing to do, is to work with customers to be able to drive use, which is ultimately just unlocking value in the platform. So yeah, that's been a great, yeah.
That's a good point, actually. Just in terms of, like, I guess the conversations you and I typically have, Randy, it's normally how I think I know what I want to do, but I'm kind of struggling to figure out how to structure it. It's either a data question or it's more visualization engine type question. But it's typically, yeah, there's a way of doing it. We just have to kind of bump heads a little bit. It's not a case of it can't be done. I think that's the nice thing about the flexibility in the kind of broader data sets and the flexibility in the engine, is that if you can kind of draw it out, and actually typically when I start kind of thinking of dashboards, as I said, I kind of think of questions, and on a piece of paper I tend to say, like, this is kind of how it should look, and it should be clean. That's generally, like, we can generally get there, right? Just because the ability within the tool itself to manipulate data and create additional fields from the data you already have in a relatively efficient manner means that you can, I guess he can do anything, but you can do a lot of stuff essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it's a great point there. Well, one thing I forgot to mention at the start of the call for the attendees, if you have questions, please feel free to put those into the chat. I'm happy to read them out and have myself, Randy, and Chris address those. So don't hesitate to share anything there. And I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Talking about the kind of the data ecosystem within finance. ERP data is really a critical area, data source as well. And I think one of the questions that comes up that we see is a treasury technology platform. How does that interact with an ERP platform? And I always say they're complementary, right? The treasury management platforms and systems technology is meant to, do things that ERPs aren't doing, but they have to kind of coexist because there's a tremendous amount of data, that AP and AR data, accounting, FX rates, chart of accounts, and so forth. And so it's, I think, important to be able to kind of bridge those things much more seamlessly, but looking at it in the unique ways for your organization and how you want to bridge data sets like that. So it's been really great seeing the evolution of technology and the different data platforms out there, and being able to consume this, so supplemented by APIs and what's happening there. And I think we all agree that there's really a continued thirst for data. And now, especially in the age of kind of AI and ML, I think the great unlock is when you have extensive data sets that have been normalized, standardized, curated, then there's really a great opportunity to leverage those additional technologies to then drive insights. And so, Chris, I'd love to kind of pick your brain or just get your thoughts around how you see, like, maybe some key use cases for the use of AI and ML on the Treasury data or the broader office of the CFO.
Yeah, I mean, you made a great point, Ed, and actually, like, broadly, Twilio's thesis is around, the AI and the ML piece is fantastic, but it's the data that matters, right? The accuracy of the data, the proprietariness of it, and how you can leverage it. I think there's some very obvious ones, like especially within like an ERP, which I guess would be very similar to in like a T4 type platform or in a TMS platform. Rather than searching for data points, you can just demand data points. So, what was Twilio's communications revenue in February? And I just, type that in, or maybe I even just say it to the microphone and it gives me the number. There's obviously stuff in the realms of predictability, right, on cash flows for sure. Though obviously it takes data and time. It depends a little bit on your business. So that, I think that's a good use case. I guess in theory, if you have a level of data and you have a level of sophistication and potentially in the AI, you could have predictive in terms of maybe even account balances and things like that. Like, you may be able to optimize further, which means you can put more cash or more of your money can go to work on investment return or in other parts of the business. So maybe you can run businesses leaner, right? I think in some way, like the AI landscape and how it interplays in like the broader treasury role is somewhat tied to like the analytics side, right? Because really where your value is coming in is saying, this is the type of information I need, this is the message I'm trying to portray, and this is the audience. And at least right now, that's not something that the AI does. It obviously makes suggestions. So I think ideally, and this is maybe one of the first steps, is the AI frees up your capacity to spend a lot more time in the 20% today that's rather than the 80% of the kind of operations side that people sit in. I think I have not seen a use case yet where someone's kind of using it end to end and it's blowing me away. But obviously there's a huge amount of potential there. But it all comes back to data. If you don't have good data, if the data is not connected to other data sources, that's where your limitations are going to be, because you can't make holistic recommendations or decisions. Everything's going to be done in a silo, and 10 decisions made in a silo just aren't going to work, frankly.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's a great way to maybe kind of wrap up here. If you don't have all the right definitions that go with that data and having it kind of standardized and normalized, you're not going to be able to leverage the full potential power of AI and ML. So, Randy, any closing thoughts that you have?
The only thing that I would add is thanks to Chris for joining us and being part of the journey as we're leveraging data analytics in Treasury 4. It's been fun. We're not where we want to be yet, but it's been a great tool to be able to sort of drive engagement. So we appreciate the partnership.
There's a couple of questions as well, guys, I've seen that popped up. If you want to take a look at those.
Yeah, let me go. Randy, do you have access to those? I don't know if I'm seeing them.
I can help moderate too if y'all need.
Yeah, Christina, if you'd read those out, that'd be great.
So for CAMT, are the ISO codes already available, or do you have to preload the ISO domain family codes?
Oh, in terms of the ISO transaction codes, we actually, in Treasury 4, we've have curated reference data, which includes all the CAMT transaction codes or ISO transaction codes, BAI, and SWIFT. So that all is part of our reference data collection. You know, when we're talking about standardizing and normalizing data, reference data is a key part of that. So it's a great question.
Perfect. And then, you know, if there's little time, are there any canned reports that would be interesting to look at? This could be something that we do offline too. It's just one of the questions that came up.
Sure, we have lots and lots of dashboards and reports that we're happy to walk through and happy to set up time one-on-one for that.
Right, well, that does conclude what's in the question box, but if anything comes up, y'all know to just drop it or reach out to us and we're happy to answer.
Great, thank you. So for anybody on the that's attending that's going to be at next week's Eurofinance conference in Santa Clara, we'll be there. Randy and myself, along with Mark Tully, will have a booth on the exhibitor floor. We'd love to have you stop by and say hi. And in fact, if you want to see some of those dashboards live, we'll be able to show those to you. So feel free to just join us there, and looking forward to a good conference next week. And kind of wrapping up here, Chris, thank you so much. I know it's a little late on your side of the pond, as they say, and really thank you so much for staying late, joining us late here on your time, and sharing with us your experiences and with the innovation that you're driving at Twilio from a Treasury and data perspective. So thank you.
And the recording will be sent out. So just expect that you'll see the recording if you have any other things that you want to reference, and we'll share that out about a day or two afterwards, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great Thursday.
Thank you.